It's a day that every parent dreads, every school official tries to prevent, and every child will never forget. Imagine the unthinkable: a routine field trip, supposed to be full of laughter, learning, and fun, turns into a nightmare when a kindergarten class simply vanishes. It's an event so extraordinary that it doesn't just capture headlines, it haunts the very core of our collective consciousness. The children, their teacher, the chaperones, gone. No one saw it coming, no one knows how it happened, and no one can explain why it occurred. What's even more chilling, however, is what would happen 8 weeks later, when a fisherman, just doing his daily routine, reels in something so unsettling, so strange, that it'll change everything we thought we knew about that day. You came here for answers. Stick with me, because what we uncover together will blow your mind. Engaging viewers. Now, I want you to picture something for a moment. A bright sunny morning, the air filled with excitement as a group of eager 5-year-olds boards a bus to a nature reserve for their field trip. Their teacher, Miss Harper, organizes the kids as they laugh and chatter, each one holding onto their lunchboxes and backpacks, filled with that innocent, wide-eyed enthusiasm that comes with youth. They wave goodbye to their parents as the bus pulls away from the school. It's a normal day, right? So, when something goes terribly wrong, it sends ripples far beyond the small town they called home. People would later ask, how could something so tragic happen in broad daylight, with so many eyes on the ground? You're probably asking, what could have happened to those children? That's exactly what I'm going to walk you through today, and trust me, by the time this video ends, you're going to be shocked at how this mystery unfolds. Building suspense and emotional connection. Think about it, every parent's worst nightmare is their child going missing. But what if it happens in plain sight, with no obvious explanation? No broken fences, no security footage to explain the disappearance. And then, when you think it's all been forgotten, months later, when the world has moved on, a simple fisherman, casting his line into a quiet river, unwittingly reels in the very key to unlock the enigma that has haunted an entire community. The truth about that field trip, the children, and what really happened out there in those woods, it's something no one ever saw coming. And I want you to keep that in mind as we dive deeper into the mystery. I can already sense your curiosity, and that's exactly what I want to tap into. But here's the thing, you need to watch until the very end because only then will you see how everything connects: the disappearances, the fisherman's find, and the chilling details that, up until now, have been kept from the public. So before we get into the heart of the story, I want to make a promise: if you stick around and listen carefully, you'll understand why this isn't just a case of kids going missing. This is something far darker, more intricate, and more mind-bending than you could ever imagine. Establishing the tone and atmosphere. Let's rewind a bit. It's been 8 weeks since that fateful day, and we're still no closer to understanding what happened on that field trip. Theories are swirling, rumors are running wild, and with every passing week, the story fades a little more into the background. For some, the case is just another tragedy, another disappearance they can't explain. But for the families of those missing children, it's a wound that refuses to heal. Imagine being a parent, desperately hoping for news, only to receive nothing. No calls, no updates. Just silence. The eerie quiet that settles after a tragedy like this is enough to drive anyone to madness. And that's exactly how the parents felt: helpless, uncertain, and lost. But then, there's a fisherman. His name is Mike. He didn't know it then, but he would soon become the most important person in unraveling this mystery. On that morning, he cast his line out into the river, not expecting to pull up anything out of the ordinary. He had no idea that his simple fishing trip would lead him to something that would set off a chain of events, something that would finally shine a light on a case that had grown cold. What he discovered wasn't just a catch, it was a clue. And not just any clue, but one that would make people question everything they thought they knew about that missing kindergarten class. Introducing the mystery without revealing too much. Now, as we go deeper into the story, I need you to hold on to something. The disappearance of those children wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. Everything you think you know about what happened that day might be wrong. The deeper you dig, the more you realize that there's something far more sinister at play. But I won't spoil it for you just yet. Let's take this step by step. The answers are coming, but only if you're willing to trust me and follow the path we're about to walk down. What did Mike reel in that morning? How did it tie back to the missing children? And why are some people desperately trying to bury the truth, going so far as to silence anyone who gets too close to the real answer? These questions are at the heart of the mystery we're trying to solve today. Setting up the cliffhanger. But here's the kicker: Mike's discovery wasn't the only thing that raised eyebrows. A few days later, there was a strange occurrence near the site of the original disappearance. Something, or rather someone, turned up where they weren't supposed to be. A witness saw something they weren't meant to see. And what they said, well, it changed everything. So here's what I need from you: stay with me. Don't skip ahead. The story is just starting to unfold, and we're only scratching the surface. What I'm about to reveal to you will make you rethink everything. Trust me when I say you don't want to miss the rest of this. The answers you came for are closer than you think. But to get there, you've got to stick around. Don't go anywhere. The truth is coming, and it's stranger than you could ever imagine. Cliffhanger ending. So, what exactly did the fisherman reel in? Was it a clue to what really happened that day, or was it something far darker? You're about to find out. Just stay with me. Mike, the fisherman, had no idea that a seemingly ordinary day out on the water would soon thrust him into the heart of a mystery that would consume his life. He was the kind of guy who found peace in the quiet solitude of nature. In his late 40s, Mike was a man who'd spent most of his adult life working as a mechanic in a nearby town. The kind of work that involved grease and tools, a life of routine and simplicity. His weekends were spent fishing at the local river, where he could forget about the pressures of everyday life and get lost in the calming sounds of rushing water. But lately, there'd been something gnawing at him. Something he couldn't quite shake. He had a sense that something was off in the town, though he couldn't pinpoint what it was. Maybe it was the constant whispers around town about the missing kindergarten class, or maybe it was the strange looks he'd been getting from people when he'd run errands or grabbed a drink at the local bar. They weren't the friendly glances he'd grown accustomed to over the years. No, these were different, more like the stares people give when they know something you don't, when they know something you should know, but they're not about to tell you. And it unsettled him. Mike hadn't been directly involved in the case of the missing children, but like everyone else, he'd heard the details. It was the talk of the town for weeks, and the mystery was something that seemed to weigh on everyone's mind. The bus carrying the kids had set off for the field trip early that morning, but by noon, when the group was supposed to be gathering for lunch in the park, the unthinkable happened. No one could explain it, no one could even begin to make sense of how something so bizarre could have taken place in broad daylight. The teacher, Miss Harper, was found in a state of shock, unable to provide any concrete answers. She was questioned by the police for days, but every time, her story seemed to shift just a little, like she was holding something back. As for the children, gone without a trace. The parents were beside themselves, frantic with worry, launching their own search efforts, but after a week, the search had come to a standstill. There was no evidence, no leads. Just a whole lot of questions. What made things worse was that the authorities had nothing concrete to go on. They had scoured the area where the children had disappeared, interviewed every witness, and even analyzed the bus's GPS data, but everything came up empty. The town was full of rumors, whispers of foul play, and hints of something more sinister, but nothing that could be confirmed. For a while, the case felt like it would be swept under the rug, one of those mysteries that would fade into obscurity, just another tragedy that couldn't be explained. But then Mike found it. What he reeled in that morning wasn't just a fish. It was something far more disturbing, something that would reignite the search, bring new eyes to the case, and ultimately lead to a series of events that no one could have anticipated. It wasn't just a clue, it was a message. A message that someone didn't want found. As Mike stood there, staring down at the strange object he had pulled from the river, he felt an overwhelming sense of unease. He couldn't put his finger on it, but there was something undeniably wrong about it. The object was wrapped in a top, the edges torn and worn as if it had been tossed around for weeks. The fisherman's hands trembled slightly as he carefully unwrapped it, revealing an old, faded backpack. At first glance, it looked like something any child would have, but as he ran his fingers over the fabric, something about it struck him as odd. The bag had clearly been in the water for a long time, its colors dulled, and the zippers were rusted shut. But it wasn't just the wear and tear that caught Mike's attention, it was the smell. There was something metallic in the air, something sharp that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. For a moment, he thought about tossing it back into the water, but something stopped him. He couldn't explain it, but it felt important. When Mike took the backpack to the police, things started to spiral. The authorities ran a check on it, and sure enough, they discovered it belonged to one of the missing children, a girl named Emily. She had been part of that fateful field trip, and yet, her parents had never received any word about her since the day she disappeared. To make matters even more unsettling, the backpack contained a small, hand-drawn map, along with a few pieces of candy, things that shouldn't have been there. But the most chilling thing was the note folded inside the map. It was brief, written in a child's handwriting, but it was clear. "I'm sorry, Miss Harper. I didn't mean to. Please don't be mad." The police couldn't make sense of it, and neither could Mike. What had happened to the children? Why would Emily have this in her possession? And why would she apologize to her teacher in such a cryptic way? Mike felt the weight of these questions settling on him as he left the police station that day. The sense of unease grew stronger, gnawing at him. Something didn't add up, and now he couldn't ignore it. But the more Mike asked around, the more he realized that the situation was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. Every lead seemed to dead end, and yet, there were whispers. Whispers of someone in town who might know more than they let on. Whispers of a stranger who had been seen near the park on the day of the field trip. Mike's instinct told him that someone close to this case was hiding something. But who? Was it Miss Harper, the teacher who seemed a bit too rattled to be completely honest? Or was it someone who had been on the periphery of the field trip, someone who might have had their own reasons for keeping quiet? Maybe there was more to the story than anyone realized. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the town was full of eyes that saw everything but chose to say nothing. His unease was compounded by the fact that people were growing more and more distant. The parents of the missing children were starting to become paranoid, their grief turning to suspicion. In quiet corners of the town, rumors circulated, rumors of people being threatened to keep quiet. And there were others who said that the children hadn't really disappeared, that they were hidden somewhere, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. With each passing day, the tension in town grew thicker, the search for answers more desperate. Mike's discovery had opened a door, but it felt like every step he took only led him deeper into a labyrinth of uncertainty. And as he dug further, it became painfully clear that the truth was far darker than anyone had anticipated. But who would be brave enough to uncover it, and who, or what, was working tirelessly to keep it buried? As Mike continued to dig deeper into the mystery of the missing kindergarten class, it became increasingly clear that this was no ordinary case. What had started as a simple curiosity about a fisherman's discovery quickly spiraled into something much darker and more dangerous. The police, despite their initial interest in the backpack and the strange note, had begun to grow weary. It wasn't long before Mike felt like they weren't entirely on his side anymore. They weren't actively obstructing his search, but their responses became more distant, more dismissive. The enthusiasm he had seen in their eyes when he first brought the backpack in seemed to fade as the weeks passed, replaced by something else, reluctance. Something about it didn't sit right with him. He knew they weren't telling him everything, and Mike, with his quiet determination, wasn't going to let this slip by unnoticed. But as he pushed forward, the obstacles began to mount. A few days after his discovery, Mike decided to take another trip to the park where the children had disappeared. He had been hoping to find anything that could offer a new clue, some trace left behind by the kids or their teacher. The area was overgrown now, the once bustling field trip destination quiet and desolate, the air heavy with a sense of foreboding. He was walking along the path, thinking back to the day the kids vanished, when something caught his eye. It was a piece of paper, crumpled and half buried beneath some fallen leaves. Mike knelt down and picked it up, feeling a rush of excitement as he saw that it was a torn page from a notebook, one that looked very similar to the notebook of Emily, the missing girl whose backpack he had found. The page had scribbles all over it, in what seemed like a frantic hand, words barely legible. As he squinted at the writing, Mike could make out the words "Don't trust her. She's not who you think." His heart skipped a beat. Who was she? And why was Emily so desperate to warn someone? He folded the page carefully, ready to bring it to the authorities, when the unexpected happened. As he stood up to leave, he felt a sharp tug on his jacket, like someone had grabbed him from behind. Spinning around, his breath caught in his throat, but there was no one there. It was a fleeting moment, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Mike's heart race. It felt like someone was watching him. He had to leave, but the unease lingered. Back at home, Mike was trying to make sense of what he had found when he received an unexpected phone call. It was from Sarah, a childhood friend of his who had recently moved back to town. Sarah had always been close to Mike, and they'd shared a bond growing up that few people understood. She had stayed away from the chaos of the investigation, but now, she was reaching out. Her voice, usually steady and confident, trembled slightly on the other end of the line. She asked if they could meet up. Mike agreed, eager for any new insight, but when he showed up at the cafe where they were supposed to meet, things took a strange turn. Sarah wasn't acting like herself. There was a nervousness in her eyes that Mike had never seen before, a kind of anxious energy that wasn't like her at all. She was fidgeting with her coffee cup, her hands trembling just enough for Mike to notice. "Mike," she said quietly, "I need you to stop. You're in too deep. This isn't something you can handle." His confusion must have been apparent because she immediately tried to calm him. "I'm not saying this to scare you," she continued, "but there's more to this than you know. You have to trust me. There are things you don't understand. The people involved in this, they don't want you poking around. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Mike stared at her, unsure of what to believe. Sarah had always been someone he could trust. But her warnings felt off, like a voice in the back of his head was telling him that there was something she wasn't saying. Before he could respond, she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She glanced around nervously, and then, without another word, walked out of the cafe. Mike sat there for a long time, processing what had just happened. There was something strange about her warning, something that made him doubt her sincerity. Was she really trying to protect him, or was there something else going on? The unease in his gut only grew stronger, and he felt the weight of her words press down on him. As he left the cafe, he tried to shake off the feeling that Sarah knew more than she was letting on. A few days later, Mike's suspicion was confirmed in the worst way possible. He returned to the police station to follow up on the torn page he had found in the park, but when he asked to see the evidence, he was told it had gone missing. His stomach dropped. The page, the key to potentially understanding what had really happened to the children, was gone. Vanished, just like the kids. No one could explain how it had disappeared, but Mike knew deep down that it wasn't an accident. Someone was covering their tracks. Someone didn't want him digging deeper. The next few days were filled with tension. Mike felt like he was being watched everywhere he went. Every step he took seemed to lead him closer to something, a truth he could feel just out of reach, but one that was quickly becoming more dangerous to uncover. Then, in a moment of desperation, Mike reached out to someone who had been strangely quiet throughout the whole ordeal, Detective Rachel Carter. She had been assigned to the case from the beginning, but she had always kept a professional distance. She was known in town for being sharp, focused, and determined, but Mike had noticed something off about her lately. She had been acting strange when they crossed paths, avoiding his questions, and seeming a bit too focused on things that didn't add up. Mike met her late one evening at a diner, hoping for some answers. What he didn't expect was the look she gave him when he slid into the booth across from her. Her eyes flickered nervously, scanning the room before she finally spoke. "I think it's time you stop looking," Rachel said in a low, almost inaudible voice. "You're stirring up something that shouldn't be stirred. There's more to this case than you'll ever understand. Let it go, Mike. For your own sake." The warning was clear. But in the way she said it, quick, almost forced, Mike felt the weight of her words, but something else, too. It was like she knew more than she was letting on. A hidden fear in her voice made him question whether she was truly on his side or if she was another obstacle in the growing web of deception. And then, just as quickly as it started, the moment ended. Rachel left without another word, disappearing into the night as quickly as she had come. Mike sat there, stunned and confused, feeling more isolated than ever. The deeper he dug, the harder it became to separate friend from foe. He was alone in this now, surrounded by shadows of people who seemed to want him to stop, people who had their own secrets to protect. As he sat there in that diner, staring at the empty booth across from him, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something massive. But was he getting closer to the truth, or was he just walking into a trap? The answer, he knew, would reveal itself soon enough. But at what cost? As Mike sat alone in that dimly lit diner, his mind racing with questions, something in the air seemed to shift. It was a feeling he couldn't quite place, but it was like a heavy storm was brewing, just beyond his reach. His every instinct told him that the deeper he dug, the more dangerous things would get. The problem was, the closer he got to the truth, the more tangled everything became, until the line between ally and enemy was practically non-existent. Mike had learned the hard way that there was no one left he could trust, not even Sarah, whose sudden warning had left him questioning their entire history together. The weight of everything felt like it was pressing down on him, threatening to suffocate him in a web of lies, deceit, and unanswered questions. Just when Mike thought he couldn't handle any more uncertainty, the universe threw another curveball his way, something so unexpected that it threatened to undo everything he thought he knew. It started with a phone call. Mike had spent the past few days trying to make sense of Rachel's cryptic warning, but he was still convinced that there was more to the case than she was letting on. He had been pacing around his house, replaying her words over and over in his mind, when his phone rang. At first, he didn't recognize the number, but something told him it was important. He picked up. The voice on the other end was shaky, almost frantic. "Mike, it's Sarah," she said. He could hear the fear in her voice, the unmistakable panic. I don't know what to do. They know I talked to you. Someone left something on my doorstep." Mike's heart dropped. "What do you mean? What was it?" Sarah hesitated, the silence stretching out between them. "It's a photo," she finally said. "A photo of me, and you. From years ago, Mike. And it's been altered. They've circled you, and there's something written on the back. It says, 'Don't trust him.'" Mike felt his breath catch in his throat. He had no idea what to make of it, but one thing was certain, someone was watching them both. His mind immediately raced to the implications. Who would send a photo like that? Why would someone go so far as to send a threat wrapped in the past? And why was it targeting him now? He didn't have time to process it all before Sarah's voice crackled through the line again, shaky but determined. "They're getting closer, Mike. They won't stop until this is over. Whatever you're digging into, whatever you think you've uncovered, it's bigger than you realize. You're in danger." The words hit him like a ton of bricks. Danger. It wasn't just a word anymore. It was real, tangible, something he could feel creeping closer with each passing moment. It wasn't just a missing class anymore, it was something darker, something far more dangerous that extended its roots deep into the fabric of the town, entwining people Mike had known all his life. Before he could respond, the line went dead. The unsettling silence hung in the air, leaving Mike with a gnawing sense of dread. He immediately dialed her back, but the call went straight to voicemail. He tried again and again, but there was no answer. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He had no way of knowing where Sarah was, or if she was even safe. The last time they had spoken, there had been nothing in her voice that suggested immediate danger. But now, after that call, he couldn't help but feel like a storm was quickly approaching, and he had no idea who would be left standing when it passed. Mike's mind raced as he sat there, running through everything that had happened. He had uncovered the missing child's notebook, found the cryptic message Emily had left behind, and received ominous warnings from Rachel, yet every time he took a step closer to the truth, something or someone seemed to push him back, harder and harder. He didn't know who was behind it, or what they had to hide, but with every new development, it became clearer that this was no longer just a case of a missing class. It was a tangled web of secrets, lies, and betrayals, and Mike was tangled right in the middle of it. In the days that followed, Mike began to receive more messages, but they weren't from Sarah. They were from an unknown source, each more cryptic than the last. One came in the form of a letter left at his doorstep, the writing in all caps, almost too perfect, as if it had been printed rather than written by hand. It said, "Stop now, or you won't like what comes next. We know what you're looking for." Mike could almost feel the cold chill that came with those words, a threat so direct that it made his skin crawl. And then there was the phone call, a voice he didn't recognize, distorted and deliberately masking its identity, whispering warnings. "You're getting too close, Mike. You're in over your head. Back off, or things will get much worse." No one seemed to know exactly who was behind the threats, but the implications were clear. They wanted Mike to stop, to give up, to forget about the missing children and the terrifying truth that lay hidden in the shadows. But Mike couldn't, he couldn't back down now. Not after everything he had uncovered. The pressure mounted, and with each passing day, Mike found himself more and more isolated, unsure of whom to trust. The threats continued, but oddly, they started to feel personal. It was as if the people behind them had somehow seen into his soul, anticipating his every move. He knew something was wrong, something much bigger than just a handful of missing kids. His search for answers had uncovered something far darker, and now, whoever was pulling the strings didn't want him to know the truth. And then, just when Mike thought he was starting to unravel the mystery, another strange event occurred. He was at the local library, doing some research into the town's history, hoping to find some connection between the current events and something from the past, when he stumbled upon an old newspaper clipping. It was buried in a dusty archive, wedged between stacks of forgotten files. The headline read, "Local teacher involved in controversial incident, a dark secret comes to light." The story was short and vague, but it mentioned an event from years ago that had been hushed up, an event involving a teacher, a missing child, and a scandal that was swept under the rug. The details were sparse, but one thing was clear: the teacher in question was Miss Harper, the same woman who had been on the field trip with the missing kids. Mike's heart raced as he read the article again, a cold feeling spreading through him. Was this the missing piece of the puzzle? Had Miss Harper been hiding something from the start? Could she be connected to the strange disappearances in ways he hadn't imagined? But just as quickly as he made that discovery, the entire file vanished. The newspaper clipping. The records. Gone without a trace. The librarian had no idea where it had gone, but Mike knew he had seen it with his own eyes. Someone was erasing the past. Someone was determined to bury the truth, no matter the cost. Now, more than ever, Mike felt the walls closing in around him. The mystery had shifted from one of simple curiosity to something more dangerous, something that threatened to consume him entirely. Everyone had secrets, and everyone had a motive. But the question that burned in his mind as he looked over his shoulder, waiting for the next threat to come, who could he trust? The pieces were falling into place, but the truth seemed farther away than ever. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty and rising tension. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something had shifted in the world around him. He'd been used to living with a sense of quiet routine, of days that passed without much thought. But now, everything was different. Every moment felt heavy, thick with the knowledge that someone or something was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. He hadn't imagined it at first, it had seemed like paranoia. But as the weeks dragged on, the feeling of being followed, of being observed from the shadows, became harder to ignore. At first, it was small things. A car that seemed to be parked on the same street whenever he left his house. A figure lingering near the alley when he passed by late at night. He told himself it was nothing. But the pattern was undeniable. Mike tried to dismiss it, to convince himself that he was just stressed, overworked, caught up in a mystery that had already consumed far too much of his life. But the unease kept growing, crawling beneath his skin like something alive, something that wouldn't stop until it suffocated him. He couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not even Sarah. After all, it was her warning that had thrown him into this mess in the first place. He had tried to reach her again after the photo, but she was unreachable. Her phone had been turned off. Her social media accounts were locked down. It was as though she had disappeared from the world completely. And Mike knew, deep down, that something wasn't right. The tipping point came late one night, as he was returning home from a seemingly fruitless visit to the local archives. He had tried to make sense of the fragments of information he'd uncovered, but the more he dug, the further away the truth seemed to slip from his grasp. As he pulled into his driveway, a sudden chill washed over him. It was past midnight, and the street was quiet, too quiet. The streetlights flickered weakly above him, casting long shadows that made the world feel unnervingly distant. He parked his car, his heart beating faster now, a feeling of dread creeping in with every step he took toward the front door. But before he could reach it, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him. Not the sound of a person walking naturally, but the almost deliberate quiet of someone trying to remain unseen. Mike froze, his blood running cold. The footsteps stopped too. His mind raced. Who was it? His thoughts scrambled for any logical explanation. Was it just a neighbor? A late-night jogger? But nothing about the situation felt right. He spun around, heart hammering in his chest, but there was nothing there. The street was empty. Not a soul in sight. Yet that gut-wrenching sensation of being watched didn't let up. It was as if the darkness itself was closing in on him, suffocating him with its weight. He rushed inside, locking the door behind him, but the feeling of being pursued lingered. The house felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in, pressing him into a corner. He sat there for hours, unable to shake the sensation that someone or something was still out there. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside seemed like a warning, a signal that whatever he had uncovered was far more dangerous than he'd realized. But it wasn't until the next morning, when he went out to check his car, that things truly took a dark turn. The once pristine exterior of his vehicle was marred with something unrecognizable, a smear of what looked like blood streaked across the window. It was fresh, too. Too fresh. The unmistakable red of it sent a wave of nausea crashing over him. But it wasn't just the blood that unsettled him. No, it was what he saw next. Scrawled on the driver's side window, in what appeared to be the same substance, was a single message: stop. You won't like what comes next. His hands trembled as he stood there, staring at the message, the weight of it sinking deep into his gut. The sense of dread that had been building over the past weeks had now crystallized into something tangible, something he couldn't deny. This wasn't just some prank. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. Whoever was behind this knew exactly who he was, where he lived, and what he was searching for. And they were making it crystal clear. They weren't going to let him find the truth. Mike stood there for what felt like an eternity, the threat hanging over him like a storm cloud. His mind spun with panic, trying to piece together what was happening. The message, the blood, the overwhelming sense of danger, it all pointed to one thing. The deeper he got into this, the more people seemed to want him to stop. It wasn't just about a missing kindergarten class anymore. It was about something far darker, something he couldn't yet understand. The stakes were higher now. And Mike was in too deep to walk away. But then, as if to reinforce everything he feared, something else happened. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. He picked it up, his heart racing as he saw the message notification. It was from an unknown number. With a sense of dread, he opened the text. We warned you, Mike. You should have listened. Sarah is gone. You're next. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Sarah. Gone. It didn't make sense. She had warned him, sure, but he hadn't seen her in days. What did this mean? Had something happened to her? Was she in danger? And more importantly, who was behind it all? The uncertainty was overwhelming. His thoughts raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. How had they found her? And why would they target someone so close to him? What did they want from him? As he stood there, holding the phone in his trembling hands, the doorbell rang. A loud, insistent sound that made him jump, his heart skipping a beat. He wasn't expecting anyone. Was this them? Were they finally here? The knocking persisted, a sharp, demanding sound that sent a chill straight to his bones. His first instinct was to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to hide. He couldn't keep running from this. Mike slowly walked to the door, his hand shaking as he gripped the doorknob. The moment he opened it, there was nothing. No one on the other side. Just the empty, silent night staring back at him. But as he closed the door, he noticed something, a small, folded piece of paper wedged into the crack, as if it had been left there intentionally. His heart hammered in his chest as he slowly picked it up, unfurling it with trembling hands. The note was short, but its impact was undeniable. You should have stopped when you had the chance. It's too late now. Mike's head spun as he stood in the doorway, the weight of the note sinking in. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. Whoever was behind this was coming for him. And the worst part was, he still didn't know who they were, or why they were doing this. Everything was pointing to something far darker than he had ever imagined, and now, it was personal. He wasn't just caught in a mystery. He was caught in a trap. And the walls were closing in fast. Mike's breath was shallow as he clutched the note in his hand, the words "it's too late now" echoing in his mind like a death sentence. The weight of everything that had happened, the strange disappearances, the cryptic messages, the blood on his car, was beginning to press in on him from all sides, suffocating him. He had been following the breadcrumbs, trying to piece together a puzzle that didn't make sense, but now it was clear. There was something far more sinister at play, something he hadn't been able to see before. For all his searching, for all his effort, he was just one step behind. And the worst part was, he had no idea who was orchestrating this, who had been manipulating everything from the shadows. Was it Miss Harper, the teacher on the field trip? Or someone else entirely? Mike's mind swirled with theories and possibilities, none of them giving him the clarity he so desperately needed. He'd been chasing ghosts, and now, it seemed like the ghosts were catching up to him. "I need you to listen to me. Everything you've been digging into, it's wrong. You've been chasing the wrong answers." She paused, her face twisted in a mix of fear and regret. "The truth isn't what you think it is. And if you keep looking for it, you'll be putting yourself in even more danger than you realize." Mike's mind raced, trying to process her words. "What do you mean? What are you talking about? Sarah, you've been gone for days, and now you show up with this cryptic warning. What's really going on?" She swallowed hard, her eyes meeting his with a vulnerability that Mike had never seen before. She seemed broken. Like something had shattered in her that Mike couldn't yet understand. "You need to trust me, Mike. Please," she whispered, stepping closer. "You think you're trying to solve a mystery, but you've been looking at it all wrong. The field trip, the missing kids, everything, it's all connected. But not in the way you think." Her words hit him like a blow to the chest. "What are you talking about? Are you saying the kids are still alive? Is that what you mean?" "Sarah, I don't understand." But before he could finish, Sarah held up her hand, cutting him off. "No, Mike. It's not that. It's worse." She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're not the only one who's been following the trail. Someone else has been too. And that person has been manipulating everything, pulling all the strings. And you know who it is." Mike felt his blood run cold. He'd heard that voice before, the cryptic messages, the threats. But who could it be? Who had the power to pull this off, to orchestrate all of it from the shadows? His mind reeled. Could it be Rachel, the one person who had always been so helpful, so seemingly innocent? Could it be Miss Harper, whose strange behavior Mike had always found unsettling? Or was it someone else entirely? Sarah's next words hit him like a freight train. "It's not Rachel. It's not Harper. It's me." Mike's heart stopped. For a moment, he didn't know if he was hearing things correctly. "What? What do you mean, it's you? Sarah, what the hell are you talking about?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself for the impact of what she was about to reveal. When she opened them again, there was no trace of the woman he thought he knew. "I was involved in the field trip, Mike. But not in the way you think. I wasn't just there as a teacher. I was part of something bigger. Something that I couldn't even understand at the time. But I do now. I had to be part of it. They made me. And when I tried to back out, when I tried to warn you, they came for me." She took a shuddering breath. "They've been watching us, Mike. All along. Every move you've made, they've known. And if you keep digging into this, they'll come for you too." Mike stared at her, his mind trying to piece together the pieces of the puzzle, but nothing fit. How could Sarah be involved in this? He trusted her. He had believed she was on his side, just as she had been when they first started this investigation. But now everything was in question. Everything he thought he knew was suddenly turned upside down. Before he could say anything more, Sarah took a step back, her face filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. "I'm sorry, Mike. I never wanted you to get pulled into this. But now, it's too late. They won't stop. And you won't get out of this unscathed. And just like that, with those final words, she turned and walked out of the door, leaving Mike standing there, stunned and utterly speechless. His mind spun, questions racing faster than he could keep up with. Who had been manipulating Sarah? Why had she lied to him? What was the real story behind the field trip and the missing kids? Had she been part of it all along, or was she just another pawn in someone else's game? The room felt colder now, emptier. Mike stood frozen, his thoughts fragmented, struggling to make sense of what had just happened. But one thing was clear: nothing was as it seemed. And the truth, whatever it was far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. With a sickening realization, Mike knew that the story he had been chasing, the mystery he had been trying to solve, wasn't just about finding the missing kids. It was about something much darker. And the worst part, he still didn't know who the real enemy was. The walls were closing in faster now, and Mike knew that every moment he spent trying to uncover the truth was another moment closer to being trapped. And someone, somewhere, was watching. Mike sat on the edge of his couch, the darkness outside pressing in around him like a physical force. His mind was still reeling from Sarah's cryptic confession, the words she had left him with, and the questions that kept swirling in his head. He wanted to believe she was telling the truth. He wanted to believe that she had been forced into something far bigger than she could comprehend, but a sick feeling in his stomach told him that there was more to the story. He couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something didn't add up, that Sarah, despite the fear in her eyes, had left something unsaid, something important. She had warned him to stop, told him to let it go, but he couldn't. He couldn't walk away from this now, not after everything that had happened. Not after the threats, the blood, the messages. And the missing kids. He couldn't just turn his back on them. But as the minutes ticked by in the silence of his home, Mike began to realize that the weight of this investigation was beginning to suffocate him. It wasn't just the danger that was closing in, it was the choices he was being forced to make, the impossible decisions that loomed on the horizon. The phone buzzed again. He didn't need to look at it to know who it was. Another unknown number, no doubt. His finger hovered over the screen, but something held him back. He was tired of the cryptic texts, the constant barrage of threats and warnings. He was tired of being in the dark, chasing a trail of lies and half-truths. He needed answers, he needed to confront someone, and he needed to do it now. With a heavy heart and a growing sense of dread, Mike picked up the phone and dialed Rachel's number. It rang 3 times before she picked up, and when she did, there was a hesitation in her voice, a faint crackle of nervousness that wasn't there before. "Mike, what's going on? You've been quiet lately." He swallowed hard, pushing past the lump in his throat. This was it. He couldn't back down now. "Rachel, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know if you're involved in this. In everything that's been happening." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a brief silence that spoke volumes. Mike could almost hear her thoughts, her hesitation. "Mike, what are you talking about?" Her voice was shaky, defensive. "No more games, Rachel," he said, his voice hardening. "I know you've been keeping something from me. I know you're involved in all of this somehow. The field trip, the missing kids, Sarah, everything. You need to tell me what's going on, or I swear to God, I'll go to the police." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence, and Mike's heart began to race in his chest. Was she going to deny it? Was she going to lie to him again? He needed to know. He needed the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Finally, Rachel spoke, her voice low and filled with something that Mike couldn't place. "Mike, I didn't want you to get dragged into this. I swear, I never wanted you to be a part of it." Her voice broke, and for the first time, Mike heard the rawness, the fear that had been lurking beneath her words. "I didn't have a choice. None of us did." The words hit Mike like a slap to the face. None of us did. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat. "What do you mean you didn't have a choice?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What are you talking about, Rachel? Who's pulling the strings here? What's going on?" Her voice cracked. "I can't tell you everything. I can't, Mike. But you have to understand, we're all being watched. Every single one of us. If you keep digging into this, if you keep asking questions, they'll come for you. They'll take everything from you. You have to let it go. Please. For your own safety, you have to walk away. Mike's stomach churned. He could feel the walls closing in around him, but he refused to back down. This wasn't just about his safety anymore. This was about finding the truth, about giving the missing kids the justice they deserved. But Rachel's words hit too close to home. What was she telling him? Was she warning him out of genuine concern, or was this part of the game, another layer of manipulation to keep him from digging deeper? He didn't know who to trust anymore. But before he could respond, the doorbell rang again. Mike's heart leapt into his throat. Who could it be this time? His mind raced, replaying everything that had happened over the past few weeks, all the twists and turns, the cryptic messages, the blood, the threats. Every step had led him here, to this moment, but now it felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, and the only way forward was into the unknown. With a sense of dread, Mike put the phone down and moved cautiously toward the door. His hands were shaking as he reached for the doorknob, the cold metal sending a shiver through his body. The moment he opened the door, his breath caught in his throat. Standing in front of him wasn't just anyone, it was a man he didn't recognize, someone he had never seen before. The man was tall, dressed in a dark suit, his face partially obscured by the shadows of the porch light. There was something unnervingly calm about him, as if he was expecting Mike, as if he knew exactly who he was. "You're Mike Miller, I presume," the man said, his voice low and smooth, almost too calm for the situation. Mike nodded slowly, unable to form words at first. His heart hammered in his chest. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his voice hoarse. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, black envelope, handing it to Mike without a word. "This is for you," he said. "Open it. You don't have much time." Mike took the envelope, his hand trembling as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, but the words on it made his blood run cold. "Stop asking questions, or else. Rachel's safety is in your hands now." The room spun. Mike's mind raced as he processed what he had just read. This was it. This was the ultimatum he had been waiting for, the moment where he had to make a choice that would define everything. His heart thudded in his chest as the gravity of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut. He couldn't keep going. He couldn't stop, either. The man in the doorway didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the night as quickly as he had appeared, leaving Mike standing there, the weight of the note still heavy in his hand. His thoughts churned in a whirlpool of confusion, fear, and uncertainty. What had he gotten himself into? Rachel's warning echoed in his mind, but so did the image of the missing children, the faces he'd never forget. There was no way he could let this go. Not now, not when he was so close to the truth. But at what cost? Would he lose everything he cared about? Would he lose Rachel, too? Mike stood frozen at the door, the decision weighing on him with crushing force. He had to choose. He had to decide between protecting those he loved and uncovering the truth. But which one would he sacrifice? The weight of the decision hung over Mike like a guillotine, his thoughts scattered and unmanageable. He was still holding the note, his hands now slick with sweat as he tried to digest its chilling message. "Rachel's safety is in your hands now." The words blurred together, but they were unmistakable. There was no way out now. If Mike didn't comply, the people he cared about would be in even more danger. He thought about Sarah's warning. She had said they were all being watched, but this was beyond anything he had prepared for. He had assumed it was just a local conspiracy, some twisted scheme surrounding the field trip and the missing children. But now, it felt like it was much larger than that. Much darker. Like the conspiracy stretched farther than he could see, like something was shifting beneath the surface, something he wasn't equipped to understand. His heart pounded in his chest as he made the decision. There was no choice. But before he could do anything, his phone buzzed again, vibrating in his pocket like a bomb about to explode. Mike jumped, his pulse quickening as he pulled it out. The message was short, almost too brief to grasp, but the meaning hit him with the force of a freight train. "Meet me. 8 p.m. Same place. Bring the evidence. Bring everything. He didn't need to ask who it was from. He knew. It was Rachel. Her cryptic messages, the secrets she was hiding, it all made sense now. She wasn't just a bystander, she was part of this. He had trusted her. That trust now felt like a gut punch, sharp and bitter. But despite everything, he had to go. He had to meet her, figure out once and for all what was going on, no matter what it meant for his safety. Because it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the kids. It was about exposing whatever twisted web they had all been caught in. Mike left the house, the night air cool against his skin as he hurried toward the meeting place. Every step he took felt heavier than the last, the sense of dread tightening in his chest. The streetlights cast long shadows, the emptiness of the night almost suffocating. The city felt like it was holding its breath, like something was about to break loose, and Mike had no idea whether he was prepared for what he was about to walk into. When he arrived, the alley was empty, no sign of Rachel. He checked his watch. 8 p.m., on the dot. His mind raced, fingers gripping the edge of the envelope he'd been holding onto for dear life. Where was she? Was this another trap? Was he being set up? He scanned the alley again, looking for any sign of movement. Nothing. Mike's throat tightened, his voice barely a whisper as he struggled against the ropes binding his wrists. Rachel, what the hell is going on? Why are you doing this? Rachel's lips twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile, and for a split second, a flicker of regret passed through her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. I didn't want to do this, Mike. But you had to know. You had to understand the bigger picture. Her words made his head spin. The pieces were finally falling into place, but the truth was darker than he could have ever imagined. The missing kids. Sarah, all of it. It was you, wasn't it? You've been manipulating me, hiding everything. What do you want from me? Rachel stepped closer, her breath cold against his skin. It's not about what I want, Mike. It's about what they want. What we all want. We didn't have a choice. She paused, as if contemplating her next words. I was just one of many. Just another pawn in a much larger game. Mike's heart pounded in his chest as he processed what she was saying. The conspiracy, this wasn't just local. This wasn't about a small group of people, or even the missing children anymore. This was something bigger. Something far more insidious. And Rachel wasn't the only one involved. She wasn't even the one pulling the strings. She had been just as trapped as he was. You're right, Rachel continued, her voice growing more distant. But it's too late now. There's no going back. They've already set everything in motion. There's nothing we can do to stop it. Before Mike could respond, the door slammed open with a force that rattled the room. Figures in dark suits poured in, men and women, their faces obscured by masks, their movements precise and calculated. And standing among them, a figure Mike had only seen in fleeting moments, the man from the alley. The one who had handed him the note. The one who had been watching him the entire time. Mike Miller, the man said, his voice cold and unyielding, I was hoping you'd understand by now. But clearly, you haven't. The man stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he locked onto Mike's gaze. You're not in control of this situation. You never were. Mike's pulse raced. Who are you? He demanded, his voice filled with desperation. Who the hell are you people? The man let out a small laugh, as though the question itself were absurd. We are the ones who see the bigger picture, Mike. We are the architects of the world you think you understand. The missing children? That was just the beginning. The field trip. Just a distraction. The truth is, we've been watching you long before you ever started poking around. The room seemed to close in on him. Every word out of this man's mouth made it clear that the game he had been playing was never meant to be won. It was rigged from the start. He was never meant to uncover the truth. He had just been a pawn, just like everyone else involved. But then something happened. A sound, a voice, pierced the tension in the room. It was Sarah's voice. Mike, she called, her voice filled with urgency. Mike whipped his head toward the source of the voice, but it wasn't her standing there. It was a figure, a man, dressed in plain clothes, holding something small and sleek in his hand. A device, an electronic signal jammer, he realized with a sinking feeling. The man pressed a button, and the lights flickered, cutting out completely for a brief moment. It was then that everything changed. The figure in the corner moved with surprising speed, knocking the device from the man's hand and sending it skidding across the floor. The mask-wearing figures moved quickly to respond, but the mysterious figure who had been watching silently from the shadows was already making his move. As the chaos unfolded, Mike realized that someone he hadn't expected, was working against the very people who had been manipulating them all along. Before he could process what was happening, Rachel turned toward him, her face filled with a mixture of fear and realization. "You don't understand," she whispered frantically. "They're not who you think they are. The people you've been chasing, they're not the ones in charge. There's someone else, someone much more dangerous. Someone who's been hiding in plain sight." The words barely registered in Mike's mind, but he felt the cold grip of panic tighten around his chest as the pieces finally began to align. All of this, the missing children, the field trip, the cryptic messages, the threats, was part of something much larger, much more far-reaching than he could have ever imagined. And as the lights flickered back on, casting a harsh light over the scene, Mike saw something he hadn't noticed before, a slight smile on the man's face. "Rachel is right," the man said, his voice like ice. "You've been chasing the wrong people all along. It was never about the kids. It was about control." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The true villain wasn't the one standing in front of him. It wasn't the shadowy figures or the faceless men in suits. It was someone else, someone he had trusted completely. And as Mike's mind finally pieced together the final part of the puzzle, he realized with sickening clarity, it was Sarah. Sarah had been manipulating him all along. She had been playing him like a puppet, guiding him deeper into the web, all while being a part of the conspiracy herself. The truth hit him like a wave, drowning him in disbelief and rage. He had been so focused on finding answers, on uncovering the truth, that he hadn't seen the most obvious betrayal of all. Before Mike could confront her, Sarah spoke again, her voice eerily calm. "You were never meant to stop it, Mike. You were meant to lead them to the final piece." And with that, everything went black. The last thing Mike heard before the darkness consumed him was the sound of a door shutting and the chilling realization that the final battle had only just begun. The sound of water lapping against the shore was the first thing Mike heard as he stirred awake. His body felt heavy, as though it had been dragged through an endless, suffocating haze. For a moment, he didn't know where he was, didn't know how much time had passed, didn't even know if he was still alive. The world around him was eerily calm, but there was a deep unease gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. He slowly sat up, his limbs aching, the cold air biting at his skin. The fog had lifted, and he found himself standing on the edge of a deserted lake, the trees in the distance swaying gently in the wind. But it wasn't the peaceful scenery that caught his attention. It was the man standing across from him. It was the same man, the one who had orchestrated it all, the one who had watched Mike from the shadows, pulling the strings. The one who had been behind the scenes, guiding him, controlling him. Mike's stomach churned as the man spoke, his voice as cold and detached as ever. "You think it's over, don't you?" the man said, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on Mike. "You think you've won, that you've uncovered the truth. But the truth, Mike, is that you were never meant to find it. You were just a tool in a much larger plan." Mike felt his anger flare, his fists clenched at his sides. "What do you want from me?" he growled. "Why all of this? Why the lies, the manipulation, the missing kids? What the hell is going on?" The man's lips twitched in what could have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You still don't understand. It was never about the kids. It was never about the field trip or the missing people. It was always about control, about influence, about shaping the future. You were a part of something bigger than you ever realized, Mike. And now, you've done exactly what was needed." Mike shook his head, the fog of confusion still clouding his mind. You used me. You made me chase ghosts, made me believe it was all connected. And Rachel. Sarah, his voice faltered, the betrayal stinging more than he could put into words. What happened to them? What's the point of all this? The man sighed, his expression unreadable. Rachel was always a means to an end. She's gone. And as for Sarah, she's still in the game. She always was. But you've learned too much. You've seen too much. Now, it's over. Mike took a step forward, his hands shaking, but he stood his ground. I'll make sure people know the truth. I won't let it end like this. The man's eyes flickered with something like amusement, but it was brief. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small device, a sleek black box with glowing blue lights. He pressed a button, and a hologram flickered to life in the air between them. It was an image of the missing children, but something was off about it. The faces were familiar, but they weren't the children Mike had seen on the news. They were children from his past, his own family. His younger sister, his cousin, his friends from years ago. The realization hit Mike like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a conspiracy to control the future. This was personal. The man watched Mike's reaction closely, his gaze unwavering. You were part of this, Mike. You were always part of it. The question isn't whether or not you can stop it, it's whether you want to. Mike's mind raced, his heart hammering in his chest. Everything had been a lie. Everything he thought he knew had been manipulated, twisted, turned into a game he could never win. He had been a pawn, a player in a game he didn't even know was being played. The world around him seemed to warp, the reality he had built for himself slipping through his fingers like sand. But in that moment, something shifted inside him. He wasn't going to let it end this way. He wasn't going to let the darkness swallow him whole. His sister, his friends, the people who had been taken, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone they had hurt, everyone they had used, everyone who had been a part of this twisted game. Mike clenched his fists tighter, steeling himself for what he had to do. He wasn't going to be their pawn anymore. He wasn't going to let them have this victory. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, he lunged at the man, knocking the device from his hands and sending it skidding across the dirt. The man stumbled back, surprise flickering across his face. Mike didn't give him a chance to recover. He was done being a spectator. The fight wasn't over. It couldn't be. But just as quickly as it had begun, the struggle stopped. The man raised a hand, and suddenly, Mike was frozen in place. The air around him thickened, his limbs heavy and immovable. It wasn't physical force. It was something else, something far darker. The man was using something more than just physical power to control him. He was controlling his mind. You're too late, the man said, his voice filled with cold finality. The system is already in motion. The truth you've uncovered, while impressive, is irrelevant now. The pieces are already in place. Mike tried to resist, to fight back, but it was like trying to move through concrete. The weight of it was unbearable. What do you want from me? He gasped, his voice barely a whisper. The man's face softened slightly, but the cruelty in his eyes never wavered. I want you to understand, Mike. I want you to see that there is no going back. This isn't just about power. It's about a new world. A world we're building. And you were always meant to be a part of it. For the first time in the entire ordeal, Mike realized something. There was no winning this. No one person could stop what was already set in motion. He could try to expose them. He could try to bring the truth to light. But the system was too ingrained, too vast. It was never meant to be stopped. And as Mike's mind spiraled into a sea of uncertainty, the man's final words echoed in his ears, a chilling reminder of the world he had just uncovered. You'll never truly know the extent of it, Mike. You'll never understand the whole picture. But you'll remember this moment. You'll know that it was never just about the kids. It was about control. And we have it. With that, the world went dark once more. The last thing Mike saw, before everything faded into nothingness, was the faintest flicker of the hologram. And then, nothing. And as the credits rolled, the audience was left with one undeniable truth. Some mysteries are too large, too intricate, too dangerous to ever fully unravel. The truth they had been chasing was only a fraction of something much bigger. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface, the game was still being played. The pieces were still moving. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And that was the most unsettling part of all.